Ladies and gentlemen, this is Tim, and this is Fake Teachers. So, here on Fake Teachers, what I try to do is talk a little bit about what's going on in the field of education, the business of education, the experience of education. I have children that are in the education system currently. I'm an educator, and part of being a fake teacher in this podcast involves making sure that what we're doing is protecting the privacy to an extent of anybody who would appear in this podcast, but then, of course, obviously, to in many ways protect my own career to an extent, but also in education, we are governed by legislation, by rules, laws, etc., that protect the privacy of students and their information. And so you can't ever use the name of a student. I wouldn't ever use the name of the place that I work. It's very easy to see the place that you work as a negative, and then to express that verbally. And I think it would always be difficult for someone to comment on their work from a place of honesty, and at the same time uh, uh, make the boss happy. So it doesn't mean that people can't listen to this. It just wouldn't make sense that when I'm talking about the places that I know of and the places that I'm aware of, even the places I've been, that I would protect those people's identities and really talk about these places in as general a terms as possible. That does mean that sometimes, unfortunately, I might venture into some things that I think might come off as stereotyping or, you know, closed-minded or really like. There's a lot of ways to talk about this subject and find yourself speaking in a way that might draw criticism. I'm open to that criticism. I've been involved again in the field of education for a dozen years now after changing careers and seeking out positions in coaching as well as teaching. And so, in my experience, I have developed quite a bit of a sense of humor about the things that we do, the things that teachers are required to do, the things that the unintended consequences of legislation and how that trickles down into a school specifically is really where my expertise lies, and I think where my criticisms and recommendations are valid. Recently today in social media, a very popular teacher group, there was a post, and reading the meme, it says, "Yes, teachers love an apple, a coffee mug, a classroom helper, or the occasional thank you. But the absolute best thing you can do for your child's teacher is to make sure you're sending a respectful student to school." Couldn't agree more. But I think even that concept of saying, hey, we could use more respectful students at school uh, runs into some disagreements that we have on campuses on the daily between, I think, in particular, educators and administrators. And I'm not sure, because I'm not an administrator and I've never been an administrator, how you might determine where the pressure is coming from to react to certain sensitivities that people might have. So when we talk about a respectful child, what a respectful child looks like and means to one person may not necessarily be the same definition that another person has of a respectful child, especially if they were time warped into the present, like many boomers seem to be, discovering that people are different in different generations. And so a lot of these behaviors that I think a lot of us think are norms, we have to understand that many of us are now teaching the children of millennials. And so we've got young people that are in our classrooms who are from an entirely different worldview and world experience. And so when we think about this idea of respectful children and what that looks like, it I think can get bogged down in some stereotypes of what people might expect from uh, a respectful child. I'm from a point of view that I don't think saying yes sir and no sir and yes ma'am and no ma'am, I don't think those are weird expectations, but there are places and people who have the feeling that those are too strict of social norms to institute in a public education circumstance. Uh, I'd be glad to have that debate and discuss how that looks. If we're not using that kind of terminology, there's certainly room for debate in that context. But I guess the underlying point is that sending a respectful child to school isn't always necessarily possible for the population, and it tends to be a bit of a cop out for teachers and educators and administrators who I think over rely on the involvement of parents and family members in managing the behavior of students in schools. And really, if you just think about our job as educators, it's often suggested that we manage and educate exclusively, math, science, history, English language arts, and keep our opinions to ourselves. But traditionally speaking, I think the public school system has been a place where people learn the norms of a civilization. And I think in terms of learning the norms of a civilization, you just really have to understand that for some households, this is the only place where that can be taught. And so I think cashing out on the responsibility of saying that we have to that we would expect you to send respectful kids to us. I mean, yes, it'd be nice, but then we also have to understand that we have to do our jobs and we have to educate those children on how to be respectful in a public facility with peers. And so I think there's a philosophical challenge where even on some campuses there are today administrators who believe that all families are entitled to and all children are entitled to their own sense of social norms by their own definition of whatever those social norms may be, and they don't feel like that the school or they as an administrator or they as an educator have a responsibility to teach um, social norms of a civilization. But my argument would be that if you're working for the public schools, you represent the government, you're an agent of government, and that means that perpetuating a civilization, a functioning civilization, is I think part of the part of the expectations in terms of what you're teaching socially when we talk about social emotional learning measures in particular. But I had a take on this though in terms of the idea of sending respectful children. I thought, I think many of these folks, it's not like they're sending their kids up to school to be disrespectful. I don't think they're teaching their children to be disrespectful to teachers. That doesn't seem reasonable to me. And sometimes when we talk about education, I think it's very important that we define the differences between uh, the kinds of schools that are struggling and struggling legitimately and schools that really are not struggling and have no challenges. And I think the biggest challenge that we have, in particular in the state where I have the most experience, Texas, the vast majority of the schools, I think, are doing quite well. And I think the vast majority of smaller one high school town schools are doing just fine. It is schools that struggle with large influxes of uh, non-English speaking students that you see the challenges in our system. So just some real rudimentary fundamental changes that that could be seen in a place like Texas would be that while we have no official language in the United States or in Texas for that matter, by default the government has established a official language because the official language of education is English. And so if students are not testing in English by the time they're in high school, not only are they in danger of not graduating. They're dragging down, so to speak, the performance of, not really my words, it's just those students and their data collectively drags down the performance of these schools that are dealing with an influx of students that don't speak English. Many of these students are highly intelligent, already educated, and in many cases might be far superior in their intellect and their experiences, educationally speaking, to their English-speaking peers. So, within reason, it seems that a lot of these students should be allowed to quote unquote test within their native language, and that I think if that were the case, you would see that a lot of these communities would not be struggling, at least with low rating of their schools, which in many cases just is just simply not an accurate representation, quote unquote, a low rating of the kind of education that's happening within a particular building. And so when we talk about respectful children, there are probably school districts where the teachers are not respected because the teachers, quite frankly, are on a much lower socioeconomic strata than would be the students and their families. And so it would be difficult to respect somebody that, your dad out earns by 6 times. That would be, I think, an inappropriate thought process, in terms of what I would expect from my children in terms of the kind of respect they would have somebody and for their profession and for their role and responsibility in the world. I would definitely, expect them to respect that person myself personally. But again, our norms are not everybody's norms. Is what it comes down to. Because I don't uh, have the ability to expect everybody in a community to follow the same exact norms as my family would follow in terms of morals and values and ethics. It doesn't even make those people wrong. It just, it's a debate that could be had. The point is that you would find that what one teacher expects in terms of respectful students may be really, really different than what another teacher might expect in a school district that would be considered urban, socioeconomically challenged. And those factors, especially again in a place like Texas, where migration from Mexico, Central America, South America is growing considerably. Those students are coming to us, and they're coming to us with considerable language needs. And so often what gets perceived as disrespectful in those environments is really just a student lashing out at a place of discomfort and a lack of ability to communicate their needs and their feelings and whatnot. Now, they certainly have peer groups that speak the language, but it does create extreme limitations in terms of their ability to participate effectively and adequately in a classroom where the teacher is not bilingual in the same language as the student. So when we talk about disrespect, I mean, there's certainly a lot of disrespectful students out there in terms of being disrespectful to their educators, but they're being disrespectful to their educators in environments where the schools themselves are not necessarily struggling, because the true fact of the matter is that most of the tests that are associated with whether or not a school is deemed a success or not are not challenging tests in school districts where students have better socioeconomic experiences from the get-go. Again, we're ranging into language that I think gets debatable in the universe of education, and so I'm certainly parsing and picking my words as best I can. But I do welcome, debate, friendly debate, on any of this. The simple point I'm trying to get to is, again, just I think I've said it several times, is it, you can expect respectful children. That would be great. But, my next thought on the idea of this is that I don't necessarily need you to send me a kid that is pre-programmed and ready to perform. I can help you with that. I'm an educator. That would be the job of the school, is to assist the family and to normalizing their child into, I think the phrase I've heard out there, versus to acculturate this person into the greater tribe. Or that's part of our role is to assist in that area. So if you send them to us and they are respectful, and that is the goal. The other part of that is that they pick up on what you do at home. They pick up on what you care about and what you talk about in your environment. And so certainly a lot of kids think that gangs, drugs, drinking, and going out to the club is important because these are the environments that they're raised in. And then some kids think going to band practice and getting your homework done and studying for the SATs on Saturday is important because that's the things that are being emphasized in their household. And so, my response to this meme online was to say that really, as teachers, what we really want to promote for people to do is for people to vote for people that are not attempting to destroy public education, and maybe not vote for people who don't believe teachers have the right to collective bargaining in a free market economy. So it's an election year, and frankly, I can help anyone develop their respectful child if you stand behind us when it's time to be tough. But I can't stand in the voting booth with people. And so it really becomes the responsibility of people that are out there in the community to maybe not buy into so much of what you hear on television and so much of the discord that we experience out there in our social media lives. And just think about the impact that your vote has on education. In Texas, there hasn't been a statewide office where a Democrat has won since the Clinton administration. And so, really, any government policies, including education policies in the state of Texas, lay squarely at the feet of one party and one party's philosophies about education and how to fund it and how to measure its effectiveness out there in the in the marketplace. And so when I put that information out there on the internet, I found that it created a lot of interest. There seems to be a lot of clicks, if you will, a lot of likes on this comment that I've made. And then a number of people started to make comments to me. Now, again, this is fake teachers. Maybe they're real, maybe they're not. Who knows? But this cat says, school choice is the solution in a market economy as it leads to competition which forces all districts to improve, while also providing competitive schools where the best teachers can find competitive pay. Now, it's important that we recognize that in brief, almost non-paragraphical communication, it can be very easy to overinterpret a person's political, social, and even moral attitudes and values. I'm not in the business of telling somebody that they're an evil person because of how they believe or how they vote. I'm in the interest of trying to educate people as to the impact of their votes and how that affects education and education policy for your kids, my kids, and the kids that I've been serving for the past dozen years. You get a sense of profound responsibility after a while once you start to see the failures of a system that seems just hell-bent on destroying itself from the inside at times. So my response to this person was to say that ship, charter schools, that ship has sailed, and there's really no turning back from those corporate cash grabs. But the concept is destructive to public education systems. You suck the intellectual leadership out of the student body, out of the pool of supportive, engaged parents, and weaken the very fabric of our communities and culture around supporting our community's kids in sports and arts and sciences. I'm going to come back to that here in a little bit. It sucks badly needed funding from schools that need that funding the most. It's done already, though, is the point that I'm making to this person. That fight is over. And so I say it's time now to give public schools the funding they need to fill the new mandate. And that new mandate is to teach the least privileged, the least engaged, the least supported, the least likely to speak the language, and most likely to have learning differences, and most likely to have transient life situations. The new paradigm of education is to take almost exclusively all of those student populations and make them meet the same standard as schools who get to pick and choose from only the most motivated households. Fortunately, of course, we're on the average still essentially in a dead even, um, a dead heat even pace with charter schools. The public schools themselves are actually performing very well against all of this. But at the same time, the idea that a charter school has an open lottery, even, or a magnet school has an open lottery, is really just a false concept, because the simple fact of the matter is again, you're choosing from a body of students that's motivated enough to put themselves into the lottery. You're choosing from a group of families that has already decided what they want for their child, and that they're putting the effort into transportation in many cases, which is not an insignificant impact on a family's life, especially if both parents work. So you're really looking at, a lot of things that go into this comparison of, which students are going to these charter schools and how are those charter schools generating the results that they're generating. So this person came back to me and they said, I fear you misunderstand and encourage you to look at a state like Indiana. School choice is designed in this state to allow all students to attend quality private schools of their choice. However, it also encourages public schools to improve their quality in order to compete. Moreover, in this state, a student receiving a voucher only receives 90% of the designated education funding, which a public school would achieve, which actually allows for more funding to be poured back into public schools. I'm just going to go ahead and say there's a lot of falsehoods and weirdness in that. But to get out of the social media and just really get back into what we know and what we're experiencing, again, my experience is Texas, and I'm going to do my research there. I have not looked into the situation in Indiana's public schools or Arizona's public schools, where they do have school choice approved already and in practice. But in practice here, we do have school choice. I think the big difference is that in Texas they want to allow truly private schools, religious private schools in particular, to be able to cash in, for lack of a better term, on the public dollar, meaning that people in Texas pay their taxes. And as I understand it, maybe I'm explaining it from my own biased point of view, but as I understand it as a fake teacher, the idea here is that we're going to take $8,000 from the public tax revenues for designated for education. We're going to take $8,000 and put it in the hands of parents who then will theoretically be able to use that $8,000 to enroll in a private school. The average tuition, by the way, of a private school in and around and close enough to my family where we would be able to transport our kids to the school. The average price tag for that is well over $15,000 a year, and that's really taking into account some pretty expensive places and some places that are considered not expensive but are still, quite expensive. So $8,000 from that is really next to nothing, is the point. Really, what that money will probably go to is schools that are already offering scholarship opportunities to competitive students, not just in sports. There's gifted students that are acquired by private schools and find that they have a better experience in those private school environments where they can really promote their skill sets. But not a small percentage of those students are athletic participants, and so those schools are offering a number of scholarships to students to participate in athletics, and so really this would just offset the cost to those schools for investing in those students they're already investing in. And so, really, a lot of the fight is really about sending money to people's friends using the public tax system to do so. It's a little weird, and it would be less weird in a state where, if, for example, extra funding, what we call Robin Hood funding, if extra funding from school districts that are drawing a surplus would go back into education and then be fed to districts that are struggling, that might help mitigate some of the impact of our funding system. But the truth of the matter is all of that money goes to the general fund, and certainly we're experiencing now again in Texas that general fund not being spent on education over this fight over these $8,000 vouchers for uh, private schools from the taxpayer system. Again, I don't know how effective that's going to be. I think the ship has already sailed. As I said, we have charter schools, and I'm not sure that you can think of a private school, as long as you have a wing of that private school that's not indoctrinating religious experience. You could have really just a charter on that campus that would deliver a private parochial or private education to that child using the charter system. So I think it's mostly just a matter of semantics at this point in time. I think the real danger that you find is that we are in a situation where a lot of our schools are just not developing the kind of community that they need to develop in and around them. The the fact of the matter is that many of our schools where traditions used to be strong and rich, those traditions are just falling apart, and they're falling apart in many ways because the traditions don't match the population of the students in that particular school. For example, 3 or 4 of the schools that I've served in uh, are in communities where we have basically 90-95% Hispanic, and soccer is an extremely popular sport for these folks and their families and their children. And so many of these schools are very competitive in soccer, and unfortunately in football, almost not competitive at all. And yet, all of the fall traditions of homecoming and pep rallies seem to be around the sport that the students really just are not that interested in. And I'm not sure what that's about. It seems a little weird. It seems like those are choices that could be made, and in terms of emphasis of the school culture. But um, you feed into that again, where you're taking away, your most involved students and your most involved families, because those students are going to charter schools and private schools and being taken out of the community. And so now you're just seeing, a degradation of what it means to be in community together. I think a great part of, living in this country in America. I know growing up in Texas, one of the great things that I experienced was just going to Friday night football games and being around the kids from the community. I could have stayed out in the trailer park and stared at the stars and read books and been isolated, but I think I got a heck of a lot more out of being forced to be out there and be in community with the people in my community. And so I learned a lot from that, and I feel like that if this entire podcast was about anything, it was about the dangers of losing that sense of community in our education. And so stay tuned. Look forward to a lot more from Fake Teachers. It'll be graduating into, pun intended, fake teachers and fake students. The idea being here is that we would love to hear from students, former students, students that have experienced the public education system, the private education system, all of those things. Hope to see you back here again. Look forward to a lot of discussions about public education and public education throughout this country, not just in Texas, really even public education throughout the world, as we try to create a better society.